What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to episode number 172
Way to prepare.
of the Designated Players Podcast. We're here today to rile some feathers up, and no, not really. Here's the thing: we're going to talk Pro Rel. We're going to talk it in USL. It's entered the U.S. soccer landscape. Does it have an impact on MLS? Not really. But we'll talk about it. We're not really here to go and say whether we should or shouldn't have it. We're not here to tell people who think that we should have it are wrong. We're here to look at the facts. We're here to analyze what is going on in front of us. We'll probably piss a bunch of people off like we have been over the last couple of episodes, but it is what it is. Connor, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Still trying to get over my messy hangover from last night.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe I opened up every social media and it's just messy, 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 messy. I'm like, gosh, this is the world we live in where an MLS player is the focus of everything in the world.
I love the fact that you called Messi an MLS player. It's so great. That's
Isn't
gonna
that
that's gonna piss people off, and I love it.
tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. I
Uh
support it.
and I love it. I love that we support it. I love that we are a supportive podcast. It's great. You support me, I support me. So good. Um Connor, talk to me before we go into what we're doing. Talk to me about your scarf of the week. What are you
All
repping?
right. Since we're talking Pro Rel, I've gone for the scarf from a league that is Pro Rel. It is Pro Rel. It bleeds Pro Rel. And I busted out the Chelsea scarf.
You're such a loser. Oh, you yell at me for trying to stretch. Which one
What
did
do
I
you
yell?
mean? That's
OKC Energy
the
from
Premier League
FKC.
is what every Pro Rel person compares Pro Rel MLS to. They say we got to go Pro Rel because the Premier League does it and they're massive for it.
So here's the thing. I can tell you're a Euro snob, and I can tell that that's all you care about, and you don't actually support lower league soccer, like everybody in this conversation, apparently. So I broke out my Forward Madison FC scarf because I support lower league football and am better than you. I
Love
could have
that.
also broken out OKC Energy, Hartford Athletic, Lexington SC, Providence City, um, Sacktown, Sac Republic. Uh,
All right, we don't need to take inventory of your scarf wall.
I
We
think
get
that's
it.
it. If you want to take inventory of our scarf, head over to TikTok. We have it up there. It's pretty awesome. All right. Should we just do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Pro Rel has entered the U.S. soccer landscape in the form of the USL. Kinda, sorta, not really. The long rumored option for the second, third, and fourth tier of U.S. soccer is being put up for a vote in the coming week. Well, they're actually kind of voting on keeping this idea just on the table, not actually implementing it, but just seeing if people still want to maybe one day talk about it. But if they vote to keep it on the table, they can circle back to it in a few years and then have another vote to implement Pro Rel in a way that definitely won't get pushback or anger from owners to the point of people just walking away and saying, no, we're not going to do it. Meaning that by the time the U.S. men's national team wins the 2026, 2030, and 2034 World Cup, we might have Pro Rel in the USA. But it's not real Pro Rel because it's only within a closed system of itself. And it doesn't include MLS, and there's no real top league. But MLS sucks, though, so we want to see it fail. Um, did I hit all the talking points? I think I did, right?
I think you hit it all. I think
All
you
right.
did.
Let's put banter aside. Let's talk about really what's happening right now. The current proposal is such that they are going to vote on the idea that this option is a legitimate model that can be sustainable long term to keep their league afloat, so to say. Uh, they're talking about having massive expansion over the next coming years, much like MLS has recently, to get enough teams to make three divisions through which teams can move up or down based on their performances in the year before. There are still lots of hurdles before they can clear this out. I will shout out our friend U.S. Soccer Reform, who has brought up some things like territory rights which, without a ton of information on my side, to my understanding, is the fact that you cannot have two teams within the same local area at USL level. I might be wrong on that. Somebody can probably correct me. Somebody probably will. Um, but it does lead us to have a few questions before we move on. So let's hit these pro rel talking points. Let's start with a positive. Is this good and will it work? What good can we take out of this? I want to turn it to you first.
I guess if we're trying to look for the positives here, this is a really good step to see whether or not people will care about Pro Rel in the US. This is a perfect opportunity for all those people saying that the sport will blow up way more if there is more at stake in a promotion relegation system as opposed to an MLS type system where there's nothing to lose really because you can finish in dead last and then still stay within the league and have no really repercussions for it. So I guess now there's an incentive to have to play every game and not just say, all right, well, we'll try again next season. I think I think that's a good aspect of it. Obviously, that's a nice part of promotion relegation, and I'm sure we will cover plenty of the negatives coming up soon.
Mm-hmm.
I think promotion relegation is good from a USL perspective in that it can differentiate itself now a bit from MLS if it wants that chance to kind of build up and try to close the gap between the value and like the salaries of MLS versus the rest of USL. This is an opportunity for them to do so and do something different. It may not necessarily work, it may not stick, but I feel like the current plan that they had going wasn't going to really help them long term. So I think it's good that they're considering other options.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I think we're going to talk a little bit about how it differentiates and what it means in a little bit. For me personally, I've been a part of soccer through all different levels, from the college game down to coaching at the grassroots level, and you can definitely see how something like this would encourage investment in a grassroots environment, right? Right now, you have the richest of the rich buying into the top division at a premium to say that I'm here, whatever. Coming with that, of course, are I don't know if I'd say expectation, but there are the second teams, the academies, the things that are starting to pop up a little bit more frequently. But now you can do that at a local level. Right now in MLS, that is happening in big, major metropolitan areas, which means the people like in Lexington, Kentucky, for example, or in areas that don't have that big urban environment that MLS wants these teams to be in, don't really have that direct pathway to a pro environment. Now, that being said, I do know that I'll go back to Lexington again because I was literally a part of it. There are now pathways to the top of these teams. So you can join the LFC or LSC, now it's called, um, youth system, play all the way through and get signed to a first team contract for the third division team. You can do that. Women's team is the same deal. Pittsburgh Riverhounds has the same thing. Riverhounds have an entire academy. I mean, there are definitely levels to um, the way things have changed over the last couple of years. So what I think you see is a if this were to go through is a much larger investment at the lower leagues. It'll give much more people a chance to be involved, um, and to have a shot to get to the top of whatever that system looks like. Um, that being said, the one thing I would say would flip that script, so to say, is if you do look, and we'll use England as the example because a lot of people do. In a league with promotion relegation, the thing that you care about most is not promoting from within or promoting from the bottom up. It is staying in the league, paying to stay in the league. So while you would encourage people to have that step up, you're also asking your ownership to disregard, for lack of a better term, uh, that model of youth players through the system to move on and instead just kind of promise that idea there. And there are some people who will do that. I know, and again, I keep going back to Lexington, and Lexington has this idea that they want to achieve success with 75% homegrown talent out of the bluegrass area. Is that going to work? I have no idea. I mean, they're year one, right? But you're then asking every owner to kind of balance that. And yes, there might be a physical pathway to do it, but how realistic is it? Does it get better? Does it get worse? Does it stay the same? I don't quite know. That's one of the questions that I think still lives in the ethos, so to speak. Oh, excuse me. I guess I'll direct this back to you then. Um, a lot of the people in the pro rel world think that you'll get an instant increase in fan retention, in viewership, all these type of things. Do you think something like this would happen if they were to implement this at USL level?
Not a chance. Not
Okay,
a chance.
very
Do you
very astute.
do you think that people are refusing to watch the NBA because the Westchester Knicks don't have a shot to play in the NBA? There's no chance. Like it works in other countries for various reasons. Every sport in the US does not have a promotion relegation. Every major sport in the US does not have a promotion relegation system. It's the same teams year in, year out, with the very rare exception that a team moves or a new team comes in or a team folds. But it's the same teams year in, year out. And popularity for these sports are through the roof. If you were to add promotion relegation, I don't think that would change things for people. If anything, it would hurt it because now these teams will start falling into lower leagues, losing more fan retention, and then in turn losing a bunch of money from it too. I don't want to like stray too far from the question, but I just don't think that people are going to be like, wow, I have to tune in, week out to USL now because I want to watch a team fight against relegation. I don't think people were watching before. I don't think promotion relegation is what's going to get them to watch it now. To me, people watch because they want to see star players. They want to see Thiago Almada. They want to see Leo Messi. They want to see Hani Mukhtar. Until you in USL doesn't really have that because they don't have the financials of MLS, and there's a big gap. I mean, that's kind of like our a huge argument for us against Pro Rel right now for the US is because of the financial gap between USL and MLS. So USL doesn't have the financials to go get those star players that will get people tuning in and watching. I think Pro Rel is a good step later on once you've really established yourself and you are able to like consistently bring in good big names like MLS is starting to do. But it needs time. I don't think USL has that. So I don't think people are magically going to start tuning in just because there's a chance a couple teams in USL Championship get relegated to USL 1.
So I will play a little bit of a devil's out. I agree with you. However, football is a different game, right? We've seen it implemented before, and a lot of people play the argument that, well, look at all these people who are watching overseas football content. It's got to be because of Pro Rel, and I would push back on that a little bit. What I would say is for the first few years, I think you do see that bump in attendance and viewership because it's different, it's unique, right? It's something that you wouldn't see before. But here's really where I think you see the impact, and it's similar across every league and every world. You don't see the impact in the middle of the season. You might see it at the beginning, but you really see it in the last 2 to 3 games for the year. Maybe the last 4 or 5 if it's a big race, right? But every time somebody will post something about, oh my God, this race is so tight, I can't believe it, I can't believe it. They haven't watched a single game of that league all year, but they're just following the storyline. Why? Because they're in it for the entertainment. It's not necessarily for the game itself, right? Or the team itself. Now, that being said, that is what would bring people in, the entertainment aspect of it. However, is it repeatable? Do you bring them back year over year? I don't know. Because if you look at what our fan base or where our target fan base should be. Personally, my um, thought: we're not going after the Euro snobs anymore. We shouldn't be, because at the end of the day, if we fix one thing, they've got 9 other things on their plate that they're not going to watch X, Y, or Z for. And at the end of the day, it's mainly because Erling Haaland and Mbappe are not playing here, so I'm not watching. Whatever. But your target audience, to me, should be that soccer mom and soccer dad who have kids playing soccer, loving the game, but have never done it themselves. Now you're going to go and bring them into an idea that you can either go to a USL championship, USL one game where it's super family friendly atmosphere. Kids have a great time. They love the game, good energy. Games are usually pretty fun. They enjoy it. Or you can say, hey, we're going to give you a chance and you can take into this team, but they might not be playing against these players next year. Will they stick around? And I use the example of Chattanooga, right? So Chattanooga's got two sides. It's got a third division NISA side, and it's got a third division USL one side. So what is stopping somebody from staying a Chattanooga versus Chattanooga, which is great, but the second one of those teams go down, just say, I'm just going to watch the other one, right? And I go back to your point saying it's not about the team yet. You don't have that connection because the game isn't there yet, right? I lost my notes here. Hold on. So, oh, okay. So another benefit. So I got lost because there's something good there. Another benefit of what we're doing here is, as we mentioned, these are in areas that don't have many local pro sports. Lexington, the closest pro sport is Cincinnati, and the closest sport after that is college basketball and college football. So you have the opportunity to build something unique there, which is similar across all things. But Pro Rel doesn't save U.S. soccer by drawing attention, right? It draws attention to those people who are getting into the. Okay, sorry, gotta edit all this out. So we'll pick it up back. We'll pick it back up. So we talked about when we got cut off. We were talking about how, right, your target audience isn't the Euro snobs who have 9 different reasons not to watch League A, B, C, D, but it's really the people who are trying to get in new, right? And you're trying to argue, not argue, but you're trying to convince them that, hey, your team is going to be playing in a lower division against lower talent with all of your players that you're probably going to have to sell and replace. So you're not going to know a majority of the people who are back on that side. Or you're going to get somebody in there and say, okay, I know this group of players. I like the way they play. I know the players they're playing against. I know the teams they're playing against, the rivalries, this, that, and the other. And you grow it a little bit more organically, like you mentioned, as an American side. That's something the American game does. And it's something that a lot of people in this country are just comfortable with and used to and understand. I'm not saying people can't understand Pro Rel, but I think it might be a drawback for the casual because they've got a team and now their team is being affected and they're not like completely invested yet. Now, there are that other group that are going to be completely invested. Oh, we went down. It kills me. I can't wait to go back up. But I don't think the question that gets asked enough is why does that feeling happen across every country in Europe, in South America, all this stuff? Why? Because the game's been there for 100+ years. This is their, why are you a Giants fan? Why am I a Jets fan? Why is my buddy a Dolphins fan? Why are we Mets and Knicks and Rangers and all these other fans? Because our parents did, and our parents before them did it, right? That connection has been there for generations. We're just the first generation getting into this, really. Maybe the second, depending on who you look at. So, yeah, there's that idea that there are going to be some people who stick with it and live and die by it, but the majority of them don't have that connection to a team. They're just going to let it go. And maybe when they come back up, oh, okay, I'll start watching again. But are they going to have that revenue, right? And the last example I want to get before we move on is let's talk Miami FC, right? Miami FC and USL right now. Let's say they go from USL Championship down to USL 1. you're trying to build lifelong fans from the ages of like 10 to 15 right now. Get them involved and say, this is going to be my team forever, right? How are you going to tell them, yeah, watch us play in USL 1 when the greatest player of all time is playing 2 blocks down at Inter Miami Stadium? You know, these are the questions that I don't think get spoken about enough because, yes, it's very, very nice to say this is how it should be. Imagine if. How great would it be if? Lots of ifs, lots of imagines, but when you get down to it, the logistics do get a little bit fuzzy. But that's just my 2 cents. I think Pro Rel again has its positives, and I've said this for a while. I do think there are positives. It grows the grassroots game, puts money at youth games. There's a ton of positives that come about it. However, it does bring more instability to a system that isn't quite ready for it yet, in my opinion. Um,
Yeah, I wanted to jump in here.
okay, you should have cut me off early.
No, it's okay. I'll let you ramble. Um, I wanted to I wanted to go back to one of your points. You mentioned a bit of a while ago about like fans of the sport in the US that are not fans of MLS. So to reference something that you were talking about off air yesterday, little correlation here, our number. Um, there's I think a large number of people currently in the US that are a fan of the sport, but not necessarily a fan of MLS. So they're a fan of top six in England, Barcelona, Real Madrid, maybe Bayern or something. To me, that stems from two things. It stems from one, they probably got that passion for that team from following a close friend, a parent who was also a fan, like you were talking about before. There's the history, there's the generational history moving like through generations, and that's how you get fans for a lifetime. That we just don't have that. It's just impossible to have that right now for MLS because it's so new. Um, and you see that for other sports in the US. You see it for football. You see it for basketball. You see it for baseball. Like my parents were a fan of this team, so I'm a fan of this team now. That will definitely, as long as MLS continues to move where they're moving, that will come. That will just take some time. And then I think the second part of it is they want to watch the best players. I think people in the US that are a fan of teams overseas are more often and very more often than not a fan of one of the top teams. You're not seeing people in the US that are like, I live and die by Burnley. I want to be a Burnley fan. No, they're Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea, Man City, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and it makes sense. People became Barcelona and Real Madrid fans because that's where Messi, Ronaldinho, Ronaldo squared. That's where they were all playing. Like, of course, they watched them while they wanted to watch the best, and while they were doing so, they became fans of the team. MLS is trending towards that direction. There are going to be a number of lifelong Inter Miami fans, even after Leo Messi hangs it up, because Messi came to Inter Miami in the first place. So going back to the point on USL for this, USL just doesn't have the ability to bring in those players and doesn't have the longevity to have lifelong fans to warrant bringing in Pro Rel to kind of capitalize on the viewership or like the amount of fans that are following or something. Because if a team goes down, let's say a team drops from championship to USL 1, it's not like, okay, I'm lifelong, I'm stuck with them, like I'm going to continue watching them. It's like, okay, I was kind of like half watching anyway. Now that they dropped down, I'm just not going to care anymore. There's nothing to keep you there. There's not a certain player that like originally brought you in and made you a fan. It's not this lifelong, my parents were a fan, I have to be a fan. Like, I know we don't have it for these other sports, but I'm sure you and I, if the Mets were to get relegated, I'm sure we would still both be Mets fans because we were just like trained from when we were young to be Mets fans.
I'll put it this way, and you actually pushed me to a different topic here, so I'm going to rearrange my notes. But the New York Jets have been the worst football team in the country for the last decade, like bar the Detroit Lions and maybe early Cleveland Browns. right? How hyped, and I'm asking you because you can experience it. How hyped do my brother and I get every year? Because that's how we grew up.
It's they get outrageously hype. It is a 16-0 season, or at this point a 17-0 season at the start of the year every single time. And if they lose one game, that's okay. It's 16-1 season.
That's right, baby. And because I get to go back in my phone every day and text my dad and text my brother about what we were going through, reminisce about stuff we've been doing for, I'm 26 now. We've been doing for 2 decades since I was 5, right? You physically can't do that right now in MLS because it wasn't around. It was born when we were born. So how are our parents going to be diehards who with years of generational when it doesn't exist, right? So I think we need to move forward into a conversation, and I'm going to use a quote to start us off. There was an owner that was quoted as saying, the current path that we are on, MLS is going to kill USL. There is rumors going on that this is USL's attempt to raise the championship, their top division, to Division One status, so that they can rival MLS and overtake it eventually. So the question that gets posed there: will it ever happen? Is it a good idea? And then I will continue on. So to me, I don't think it ever happens. I don't think it happens in my lifetime. At least there are a lot more. There's a lot more there than Pro Rel that's needed to make that a Division One, league. Uh, First and foremost, on how much money you can pay players. I know we had spoken about this before. The maximum amount of money they can spend on a roster right now is $2.5 million. Like the MLS minimum salary is like a quarter of that. I think it's close to that. Maybe 10% of that. Right. So there that massive, you're going to ask somebody to start a Division One league with $5 million. Eventually, if they get to that point, you're going back to MLS 1.0, which was great when we had nothing, but we already have something. We don't need to have it rivaled. And I don't believe it's a good idea. Soccer Wars is fun on Twitter and fun to laugh about, but the nightmare that was the Division Two debacle between NASL dying days and USL, the D3 project. I mean, we're going to talk about these when we get to them in our history series, but just nightmares of years of trying to figure out what our shape is going to look like in this country. You never quite knew where we were going to go, which doesn't bode well for a Pro Rel system, because how do you know where you're going to get relegated to? We can't figure out which level is which, right? So uh, this is a really good segue into something that you had just mentioned. I don't believe MLS is doing what they're doing to intentionally kill off lower division, because it's silly. You don't grow a game that way. I think they've done a ton of good work, working with teams, creating their second MLS division, MLS 2 or MLS Next Pro now, where all these kids are playing. They're doing better about it. But I do not disagree that USL is dying. This is a Hail Mary for me. They are loading up Aaron Rodgers style, chuck it down the field and see if it'll work. But the reason that they don't have what they have now is because we need to kill off a narrative that is used very, very frequently. And I disagree with it, which is tough for me to say. Too many people go around saying that soccer has made it in this country, and then follow it up directly with, why would anybody watch a lower division if they can't move up? If a sport has made it in a country, you shouldn't have to have a conversation about how to entice them to watch one league versus another, or watch any league at all. Right? If you've got a local league, Lexington SC, and you are saying that I want to have Pro Rel so that I can watch this team and it matters to me, you're not here to watch the game. You're not here because the game has made it. You're here for entertainment. This goes back to something you had mentioned in our last segment, where if you ask 95% of the fans, soccer fans in the country, Man City, Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Everton, because we're massive, Barca, Real Madrid, PSG, maybe Monaco if they were there for like the Falcao days, maybe, and then Juve, Napoli, Milan, and Milan. Right? There's a reason why they're a fan of these teams. It's because entertainment has made it in this country, not the sport. That's why people are massive fans of the Premier League because the Premier League is the most entertaining one there. It's marketed brilliantly to make you want to watch it because it's supposed to be so enticing. Why do people watch the EPL over Bundesliga or Ligue 1, right? Why does everybody have a favorite EPL side, but they don't have a French side? Because it's marketed so well, right? That's why the Champions League is massive in the USA, the UEFA Champions League. You've got the UEFA Champions League and the CONCACAF Champions League are the same type of tournament. The best teams from each region come in and play each other. You usually have a similar champion from a similar area winning every single year. But for some reason, everybody in the USA loves the European one, but not the American, right? Does the European one have any team out? And we'll use England again as an example. Any team from England that's been promoted outside of Leicester, who is the one and only shot that has gotten to that point. I don't think so. I might be wrong. Um, Barca and Madrid, massive here because, like you mentioned, the star players, right? PSG was massive. I bet you they fall off the map in 3 years because all their players are leaving. US goes for entertainment value. The USL might bring some in with whatever rule changes they make. But at the end of the day, if the only thing that you can provide to an argument to raise your stock is 3 games at the end of the year that determine who you play the next year, and it's not about where you are, who you're playing, rephrase, who you're playing with, right, players wise, where you're playing, right, if you're not going off to these CONCACAF Champions Leagues, right, which, again, I think is another problem. I'm not going to sit here and say that it should all be all MLS teams, but at the end of the day, that's just the way it is. European teams don't get second division sides nearly ever. You can complain about it all you want. That's how it is. Do all of these problems go away with Pro Rel? I don't think so. I don't think that Pro Rel in USL raises the stock in the country or not in the state, wherever. Now, however, if it does, rock on. Let's do it. I'm happy for it. I'm not sitting here, pounding my fist at the wall. I'm happy for it. I'm just weary about the success that it would have with the risks that it poses. And I'd rather continue on a path that we are, where we're competing in the global market, we're competing on the national stage, the international stage, versus tearing it all down because we're going to take a team from USL, bring them up to MLS. They don't know how to spend their money. They go back down, and now we have another team that's gone down. It's a whole nightmare because they had one bad year. There's the conversation that can be had regarding the fluidity of MLS too. You don't have the same tiers, right? You've got the top 6 in England, the middle, then you've got your kind of fringe 1-2, and then it goes down from there. MLS, we just saw a team that went dead last 3 years in a row to Supporter Shield leaders in 2 years. You can't ever know if the next move you're going to make is shutting it down. In England, you know that you're going to be okay because Man City, Man United, Arsenal are always going to be there. They're always going to be able to be making all of this money and putting it back in, paying off whatever they need to pay off. Real Madrid and Barcelona have kept La Liga afloat for years. Where are we finding that money, right?
You know what I think? I'm going to probably go off on a little bit of a different direction here. And not to pile on more of the negatives of Pro Rel for USL, but I think one of the things that makes Pro Rel so great in, let's say, like England, for example, as a fan of a lower league side, is the ultimate dream, I'll call it.
Yeah.
The ultimate dream to make it to the Premier League. Why? Payday. It's massive. But also the marketing, like you were talking about, the press, people start to learn about the team. Okay, so then let's say you get to the Premier League, you have some years there. what's the next dream? Like you always have something more to aspire to. Okay, you want to win the league. Okay, you've won the league. Now what? Go win the Champions League. Like there's always a next step when it comes to the promotion relegation in Europe. And when it comes to USL promotion relegation, I just don't see there being an ultimate dream. How different is it for USL Championship from USL 1, USL 2? Probably a little bit. I don't think it's where I don't think it's to a point where you're seeing a team from USL 1 being like, I'm so dedicated to this team now because we need to meet our ultimate dream of making it to USL Championship. Because I just don't think it's going to be that much different. I don't think there's it would be like if you brought MLS and USL Championship, USL 1, and you made a promotion relegation system, now you might be talking about a situation where maybe somebody who's a Lexington fan is like, okay, we have a dream now. Like MLS is that much further ahead financially that like it would be a dream for our club to get to that level and collect those finances, play in the same league as Leo Messi. But I think when it's just the USL sides, it doesn't have that ultimate goal. And I don't think that's going to inspire fans to be like, I have to follow my team that we have to make it to USL Championship one day. And that this isn't me making the argument that we should have Pro Rel with MLS sides and USL Championship or USL sides, because I think the gap in the financials is still too large, and there's not that loyalty to MLS yet to the point where people will stick around if a team gets relegated.
I love that. I think it's a great point, and I will say that is definitely part of that mindset of taking USL Championship to Division One status, so that they can have that idea of saying, I can play in a Champions League one day, right? Now MLS has all these big players, but if you can get it to a Division One status, you can. I think it would take a lot of time, but you could get to where we are now.
Well,
The re
let me
oh,
sorry,
go
I'm
ahead.
going to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Let me ask you this. If you're a player in Europe, you're looking to make a move to the US. Let's say USL sets up USL Championship as now another Division 1 side. And they're in a promotion relegation system with USL 1, USL 2, and then there's MLS who's their standalone league. Let's say everything else is consistent. Players, teams, all that, financials, all that is consistent. If you're a player, which league are you going to go to? Are you going to go to USL Championship side just because there's promotion relegation? Or are you going to go play in MLS where you can make 10 times the money and you can go play with guys like Leo Messi, Sergio Busquets, all these other amazing players, Lorenzo Insigne?
And challenge for international competitions too, right? The only way a USL Championship side right now can get in there is through US Open Cup. Odds are a little bit low, right? Um, Completely agree. Now, again, that is obviously going to be the goal eventually one day, but I don't think I think this is almost the negative of this like American thing of like, if I want it, I can just go get it. Because now you've got everybody thinking in the second division that they can just be a first division and go, which it's going to set us back, right? Having two division ones is likely going to set us back. Again, I'm maybe that's just a prediction, but I have a feeling it will. I do want to move on here because we can waffle, and I don't want to waffle. The biggest part of Pro Rel and why it's successful, to my knowledge, again, I'm not an expert, I don't claim to be so, is this idea that teams will always survive the drop, always, because the top league pays them out over a period of 3 or 5 years in what's called these parachute payments. What is USL? What do you think is USL's best way to control this? Um, because as we mentioned, they're not bringing in as much money as MLS is. They're not bringing in much money nearly at all. So how do you ensure teams that if you take a drop, you're not going to have to fold or sell?
So I think the benefit here for USL is that I think, and I don't know this for sure, I could completely just be making this up. I haven't really looked into the details of the different USL leagues, but I imagine they're much more similar financially than a change from MLS to USL Championship. So I think a drop from USL Championship or USL 1 to like USL 2 or USL 1 won't be as detrimental to the point where they're like, we need money from the league or we're toast. I mean, there's a chance that you will find a couple teams that can't survive the drop and, financially continue to just dissolve and then eventually the club's just gone. But I think you would see that much more to the point where you would probably need some kind of parachute payment if it were like a Chicago Fire or I should actually pick a bad team, Toronto FC getting
Wow.
relegated.
Yes, love the Chicago love.
Toronto getting relegated down to USL Championship, who now have to somehow pay Lorenzo Insigne, but using USL Championship money. Like they would need. Well, first of all, they probably had to sell him.
Right.
But
yeah, I would say, or sell him and then lose the merchandise, lose the fan retention that came just for him.
right. But to your point also before, there's that much lower cap in USL Championship. You have everybody on the roster who's going to be way too expensive for that level. You're going to have to lose like every player on the team, or they're all going to have to renegotiate on smaller contracts. The club would be destroyed. I think obviously you'd have to talk about changing financials in the USL Championship, but that's going to be a very tricky conversation. That's a situation where I think they would need parachute payments. I think in this case, they might be all right without it. So I think it's more even between the levels. So I think it's actually a good opportunity for them to actually implement a Pro Rel. I'll give another positive. I think it's a positive that they're so close in level that they could make those moves without killing clubs, hopefully.
That was exactly where I was going with it too. Is that we've talked about it. I think we've only talked about Pro Rel like properly once outside of it, and I think we both agreed that USL was the right place to try it to see if it will work because of how close they are together. Likewise, because USL owns all of them, any sort of TV revenue that comes in can be equally split amongst the 36 teams, or at least to a close enough point where it's, uh, 35, 30, 25. So, I don't know if those numbers add up. They're probably close, but you know what I mean, right? If it's close enough where you're not really feeling that hit, you'll survive. And I think that's likely the way they go about it, or likely the way they should go about it. Um, but I think the real focus is going to be that first year, that first season is going to be massive make or break if they're trying to bring in sponsors, right? Because you're going to need big sponsors to have some sort of change. You're not going to do it based off of the money you have coming in now, because if you were, changes would likely already be made or being announced by now. So this is a really good time for all those Pro Rel for USA guys to step up and support their lower leagues, because if they don't, I don't see this working. I see this failing, and I don't know what would happen after that. Because if you're putting this gamble in and it fails, what happens to these teams? I don't know. But USL is the right place to do it. You're also talking about having a better chance of getting new owners if you do have to sell. You cannot, I promise you cannot find me somebody with currently with the means. Anybody who has, a couple $1,000s would say, yeah, I'd love to spend $500 million on an MLS team and then implement Pro Rel, right? But the people who actually have that sort of money, you cannot find me a single one of them who's going to buy in a franchise at 500 mil, where the valuation instantly jumps to 750 next year, and then tell them, oh, by the way, if you have a bad first year, like almost every new team does, your valuation drops from 750 to 20. Not a chance. Not a
Nobody
chance.
would invest.
Right, exactly. However, if you look at something, first of all, as we mentioned, you'll see a lot more people buying into the fourth division, right? working their way up to a second, whatever, which is awesome. However, you're also going to look at more people more enticed to buy a third division club with the what's the word? With the
The risk,
no, the opposite of the risk.
opportunity.
Opportunity. Thank you. This is why you're the accountant guy. You're good with numbers. Um, with the opportunity to increase your valuation with a much smaller risk if it fails. That is where that whole thing happens. So my last question, unless you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, since so many people are huge fans in the U.S. apparently of this side, I think there's probably a pretty strong reason as to why Ryan Gosling and crew bought into Wrexham, because they could do that at like 100th of the cost that it would take to buy Chelsea. Whereas the risk versus the reward in that case is, okay, the risk is we lose the amount of money we invested in it, which is like 100 or like a
Uh,
thousand times
I
less
think it was
than if you did.
135th of their combined net worth.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like the risk is that you lose it all, right? Like that's the worst case scenario. You lose it all.
Right.
And that 135th of your worth is gone. The reward is that you get it, you build it all the way up to the Premier League, and now your thing's worth like billions. Uh, Whereas if you do it in the Premier League and you are Todd Bowley and you go buy Chelsea for billions and billions of dollars, the worst case scenario, obviously it's not going to happen to a point where it's going to be zero, but the worst case scenario is Chelsea completely fall apart. The value of the club continues to plummet, and he can go from billions down to like tens of millions, and now he's lost a ton of money. So
Right.
that's I think, to your point, it would be like nobody's going to invest in MLS, which is the Premier League equivalent in this case, to have their valuation just potentially plummet versus like build up a bit more. Like maybe there's a 200 whatever 100 million potential reward in terms of growing valuation versus if we got relegated, now we drop 450 million in valuation.
Right.
Nobody would do that. That's a stupid investment.
Yeah, it's dumb. And what's funny is, right? I think Ryan Reynolds and the other guy. I don't know who the other guy is. I don't know what his last name is. I know it's Rob Mackle something or other. He they I
Yeah, Rob McElraney or something, I
yeah,
think.
I'm fairly certain I read somewhere that they actually had no idea like anything about Wrexham soccer, whatever. They just saw it was up for sale. I was like, oh, that'd be a fun thing to do. And then they bought into it. Then they got into it, which is great, awesome. And I think that's the way you want to do it. The one thing I think we should add before moving on to the end of it is a
Sorry,
lot of people.
can I jump in for a quick second? I said Ryan Gosling before. I meant to say Ryan Reynolds for
Yeah,
Wrexham owner.
they're all
I
the
I
same.
got the Barbie movie on my mind. Clearly, I've
Yeah,
been
yeah.
getting them confused a lot lately. All right, go
Nice.
ahead.
Um, a lot of people will use Pro Rel as a like grassroots, and I agree that it is a lot more connected to the grassroots than MLS is. The reason why there's such a massive connection to my estimation in England is because every town has a pro team associated with it, which is physically impossible in the United States. You cannot physically do that, which is why you probably have that disconnect there and why people support state teams versus town teams. And it would be great for the town team to become the state team, right? But you still have that idea. Like if you are somebody who lives in Austin, Texas, and you're supporting Austin FC, and some team from Houston becomes the next, Houston team, and Austin goes down, are you driving all the way out to Houston to go support that team? No, you're not. So you have to have that balance too. I think the question really should be how can we grow the grassroots in a more holistic way? Um, but that's a conversation for another time. The last question I want to ask on this topic, unless
I
you
want
want
to.
to,
I'm gonna jump in again. I think that is a really great. You'll like this because I'm gonna compliment you. I think that was a really
yes,
great point that you made. In
thank you.
England, in England, you're like no matter where you put someone, drop someone in, you're like 15 minutes from a team. No matter where you drop them on the map in England, you're like 15 minutes from some team at some level. If you were to do that in the US, let's say you drop someone in Colorado, right? You have your Colorado Rapids. If for whatever reason you don't want to root for the Colorado Rapids, what's your next option? It could be hundreds of miles before you find the next team that you want to support. If we put you in Montana, Montana's a massive state. I don't think there's any teams in Montana at any of the
There are not.
levels.
I also don't think Montana exists, but go on.
And that is a valid question. But if you are someone from Montana and you want to support a team, it's impossible to go see them live. There's not 15 minutes for you to go find any team. You'd have to probably fly to go watch a team play live. So you can only follow online. Like, I think people definitely sleep on that part. Like, the geography itself is definitely a part of how the game is different here versus if you were to compare it to England. England is so close together. It's so easy to have a hometown team, to have a team that you want to follow. I mean, even for us in New York, obviously there are many teams here, but there's not something that's like 15 minutes away. Even for me, it's still like an hour to go to Yankee Stadium. It's an hour to go to watch Red Bull. Like the equivalent in England, you're like halfway across the country in an hour.
I'm looking up here. It looks like they've I can't find the name of a team, but they likely have something in MPSL. But again, as you mentioned, they can, I mean, you can even put that in the center of the state and you're still asking people to support from 4, 5, 6 hours away, right? The massive geography of the country does provide an obstacle. And I know everybody's like, oh, let's just make 50 teams and every team, the best team from every state can go into the top league and make it like an American Super League. And, it's on paper, it's not a terrible idea. The logistics behind it would probably get a little sketchy, but I just don't, I don't know why we would take that risk when we've already got something that's working, right? So the last question I want to ask you is realistic end goal versus the optimal end goal. What do you think is the glass ceiling that USL Championship is going to break through? And then what do you think is really going to happen? Make our little prediction here.
I don't even see a glass ceiling where they dip into MLS's pool at all, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I almost feel like glass ceiling is that they stay afloat. They continue to exist. That seems kind of, I know it sounds kind of harsh, but I don't see promotion relegation skyrocketing the popularity of this league. Maybe it's a good opportunity to kind of build up some more young players, maybe get some more development there, kind of watch guys from lower league teams build up and get a little bit more publicity, I guess, as they get to like USL Championship. I think realistically, I like the move if they were to do it. I think it's something different. I think if they continued to do the same thing that they were doing, they would make no progress towards closing that gap between MLS as MLS continues to grow the gap.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing in Leo Messi just stretched the gap like 8 times more than it already was. So they definitely needed to try something different. I can definitely appreciate that they're looking into this. I don't think it's a bad idea. I would definitely support it if they did it. I think realistically, it's not going to hurt MLS in the slightest, but I do think it could get some more people to watch USL. So I think it's a good thing for them. I support it. I hope it goes well for them. I would hope it closes the gap. I think more competition is better for everybody, most likely. So I think glass ceiling, I guess, then in that case, maybe they start to attract a couple of bigger names that are kind of winding down and get them to their league. I think that would be a great starting point for them.
I like a lot of what you said there. I think I've got actually got three tiers here.
Hmm.
First off, USL, obviously the glass ceiling, they skyrocket. They gain enough fans, their merch sales go up. They retain those fans because everybody's gonna, as usually what happens is everybody's gonna lose their mind over year one numbers. Look at the impact it made. And then 5 years on, when it drops 30%, nobody's gonna mention things, right? If they can retain that and everything else that comes with this implementation, they open up their roster rules, they build proper infrastructure. We're still looking at half of the teams in the top division of USL playing in rented baseball stadiums. So you're able to build proper infrastructure, which is it's starting. I'm not saying it's not starting. I've seen it, but they're still getting there. They need to grow their footprint in the game. Then they get closer to MLS valuation, and you can maybe work on the idea of bringing it all together. That is optimal. Realistically, I think the positive realism out of this, like you mentioned, is that they survive, they gain a little bit of traction, and they show that they are a proper second division, right? I just mentioned the infrastructure. The infrastructure needs to be better. Player purchases, right? I mean, the second division in a lot of countries is not known for the biggest stars, but they can still go out and move things around. They're starting to sell people off, which is great. Josh Widener is one of those examples. But to be able to then bring players in would be really, really good too. I don't believe it ever jumps to that point. And if it does, I don't want to know where we're going to go from that because you are basically restarting from zero. That being said, the realistic one that I see happening is that year one, everything's up here. Pro Rel for USA crowd is standing on their high horse. Big smile, look at me. Then the numbers come out in year two. They look like crap. And then they start complaining about how it's not real Pro Rel and it never really was going to work anyway. And it's MLS's fault somehow. And US soccer needs to be burned to the ground. Um, it's nothing about the fact that they couldn't pull actual fans, but it's somebody else's fault. Uh, I don't think the whole thing goes under. I think the league still survives, but it'll make a minimal blip to the U.S. soccer landscape. Um, I mean, look at it. Even before this was all put together, the second it gets announced, half of Pro Rel Twitter, who had been championing it for years, is then complaining because it's not a real Pro Rel system, or it's not fair, it's not open. You know, excuses for something that they had been championing for the last 5 years. But here's the closing point from me, right? You now have a pro rel system, and this is, for those who are in support of this system, your system is coming. Hopefully, if they pass this vote and they put it all together, whatever, go support it. Go find your local USL club, even if it's 2 hours away, like we were just talking about. Go get season tickets. Go buy merch. Go bring your friends to the game. Go get them involved. Go become part of the supporter section. Do all of you want all this to work? Now is your chance. There are no more excuses. You have your opportunity. You have the opportunity to show what it is. Go get it done. Now, would that be kind of sad? Because that's not the right word. Um, I don't know. It would feel kind of hard done because, as I mentioned earlier, if your team was there already and you're only going to go now because there's a slight chance of going up, that kind of feels disingenuous.
Yeah, it's artificial.
Yeah, yeah, and that kind of, yeah, whatever. Um, but at the end of the day, and I will end with this on this topic. I don't quite care if it how it gets there if it does work. If it ends up working, I'm all for it. I don't care. Because at the end of the day, I'm here to see the game grow, not in MLS, not in USL, in the country. So I don't care if this is the right way forward, the wrong way forward. It doesn't matter to me. What I want to see is growth. So if it works, great. I'm here. I'll support it. I'll be happy for it. If it doesn't work, we're going to go back MLS. It doesn't matter. And guess what? Football is football. Soccer is soccer. You don't need to have it exactly the same way to watch it. I can watch my Premier League side lose 6-0 on a Saturday morning. come back and watch Red Bull lose 7-0 on a Saturday afternoon, and then Sunday afternoon go watch Lexington FC or Lexington FC. I'm using the old club term. Lexington FC playing USL Championship with one or two decent players, and the rest of them are semi-pros, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about the game. I don't care whether they can move up, move down. I'm here to watch the game. I'm enjoying it. I watch high school level games when I'm recruiting. I watch college level games when I'm scouting, and I'm watching all over the place. That's how the game makes it. Game doesn't make it because like, oh, I'm going to support these guys. If they can get to the second division, maybe I'll support them a little more. But if they get to the first division, oh, I'm all for it. That's as you mentioned, it's artificial. It's disingenuous. But if you can get behind it and get involved with it, and it works, I don't care if it's disingenuous now because it might be genuine later.
Okay, I wanna hopefully we're like right at the hour mark, so I
Okay,
wanna
great.
hopefully end it on like one
Mm-hmm.
hopefully quick question for you. I'll come in with a question.
Sure.
Do you think MLS can implement Pro Rel without USL? Can they
Oh,
continue to expand enough, get to
yeah.
30, 40 teams and make their own Pro Rel without using teams from USL? Do you
Oh,
think
yeah.
they can do that?
100%. Yeah.
Do you think they
100%.
should do that?
Should they do it? It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, basically, there's a lot of logistics that go into it, right? I don't, I don't see that they would need to. I think we're in a good spot already. Now, if they did, again, don't care for it, don't mind, don't, it doesn't matter. I think the only thing that that would do is maybe bridge the gap a little bit closer to maybe uniting it all together, right? If you've got teams that are, again, 55-45 split in TV money, revenue, whatever. So you're all going to get a good chunk of it, enough to survive. If you go down, it is what it is. You're all still going to be put on Apple TV, whatever, right? If they were to put that in, cool. It adds another layer to it. Are you still going to keep MLS playoffs? Are we going to get rid of them? There's a lot of things that go into that, but should they do it? I'm not going to say should or shouldn't. Do they need to? I don't think they need to. By the way, Pro Rel in and of itself is a want, not a need. I wanted to start off with that and I forgot because I got excited. We don't need it to be successful, right? We have shown that we don't need Pro Rel. Would it add layers of complexity? Sure. Would it add entertainment towards the end of the year? Sure. Do we need it to be successful? No. So can MLS do it? Yeah. Will they do it? Probably not. Should they do it? Eh.
I'm gonna say that at the moment, I think that the only way you make Pro Rel work in the US is if MLS were to make its own Pro Rel.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would miserably fail if they tried to do it with USL at the current moment. So I think the only way that they can get Pro Rel to work is if they got up to, I don't know, you could even do it with 30 teams. You could split 15-15. If they went up to 40, you could do 20-20.
2020, sure.
Yeah. And to your exact point, you share the revenues, you have that same financial security as like in England would. If you go down and you're in financial trouble, we have the money, we could help you out. We're all in the same league together. We share the Apple TV revenue. You get shown on Apple TV still. I think that's the way that you get it to work here. I think that's the way, if you are going to have Pro Rel, that's the way you do it. I just don't think you can just take all the random leagues in the US and just stick them all into one pyramid and make it work. It's just too drastically different. I think seeing teams like, I'll just try to think of like the teams towards the bottom right now, like the Torontos, Colorados, seeing those teams drop down in a completely isolated MLS Pro Rel won't kill those teams, in my opinion. But seeing them drop down to go play like, and this isn't me trying to take a shot at the USL Championship teams, but seeing them drop down and go play like a Memphis and Omaha, like I think that would hurt them a lot more than if they're still playing against MLS sides, just in the tier below.
Yeah.
They're still on Apple TV. They're still treated basically just like an MLS side. They just happen to be in MLS 2.
Sure. And that's almost like having two different conferences, right? As we do now, but now you're just splitting it top to bottom instead of left to right. Um, Again, I think there are positives to this. I think that you would see a growth at the bottom to push up to the top. I think you look at involvement, you might keep those players around and I'm sorry, keep those fans around and create lifelong fans. I think we've shown that just with Leeds Leeds United is a great example, right? How many Leeds fans came over when Jesse Marsh was bringing Tyler Adams and Weston and Brendan over there, and the second they dropped, it's like, oh, I don't even know what they're doing anymore, right? The drop loses interest from a lot of people, and they'll only stick around for the top level. Because if it wasn't that way, if it was about having a connection to a team that's right next to you, you'd see sold out arenas. And you're starting to, by the way. Fourth division had I think it was Annapolis FC, maybe. I don't have the name. I might be getting that wrong. I'm sorry, but had 4,000, 5,000 people sell out maybe like a local park or maybe a high school, something like that. And it was electric flares. I mean, it was great. That is obviously the one of the few, but it's showing that we are kind of making steps in that right direction. Call me in 30 years when we've got another generation involved, when we've got another generation of people saying, soccer is my sport. I like football. I like basketball. I like baseball. I like hockey. Soccer is my sport. You get another generation of that, we've got now stronger ties to everything, local, pro, grassroots, whatever. That's when you need to start seeing it. I think the expectation is Pro Rel will create that. And I don't think that's the case. I think time creates that. Then you can come in when it's ready. That's where I stand on that. So at the end of the day, let's just summarize this up. This is a vote that has been put up just to keep the idea on the table and work towards implementation. It's not coming tomorrow. It's not coming next year. We're still likely 3 to 5 years from any Pro Rel actually being here. If and when it happens, a lot of interesting watching will go on. But I think the implementation doesn't mean instant success, but it might. We all will be watching. We all will wait and see. But this is your chance, my friends from Pro Rel USA. Go support your local team. Anything more, friend?
I think that's a good place to end it.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We look forward to hearing your raging comments. Make sure you're following us wherever you get your podcasts. When we next go live. Next episode will come out on Wednesday, where we go back into the argument. Well, Saudi Arabia versus MLS, which one's better? Because we didn't have enough. Feather ruffling in this one. Make sure you're following us wherever you get social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I'm not even throwing Threads in there anymore. I haven't opened that in weeks. So when we post our clips, we're going to take all these clips. We're going to interact with you on Twitter. It's great. It's going to be fun. I definitely am really looking forward to it, and I'm not being sarcastic in the slightest. And then make sure you tell your friends, share it, and let's get connected. We got 2 more followers away from 200 on YouTube, and we are 5 away on TikTok from 300. So get your friends, go get involved, and let's make some levels here, friends. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players Podcast. See ya.